when and how did you meet Mom?
We were both teaching at Morning Sun. I had been there 2 years. I started in 50, and she came there in 52, at the fall of 52. And I was starting my third year of being at Morning Sun teaching, and she came in as a sixth grade teacher there at Morning Sun. And we started dating, I suspect, around November, December of that year, and then it went from there. And we might have been a little earlier than that, because we got engaged at Christmas time, if I remember right. Yeah, we did. We got engaged, and that's how we met. And it started. I had a car, she didn't, so that helped a little bit to run around, do things.
So you were teaching junior high music?
No,
Were you in the same building at that time?
At Morning Sun they had a separate elementary school, and I was teaching everything from 5th grade through 12th grade in band, and I went over there to get kids out to give lessons to of the beginners and those that are already in for a year or so, and worked with them over at the elementary school, maybe once or twice a week. Do that.
So how did you get in contact with Mom then? I mean, were you just coming over and picking kids up, or did you hang around and teach anything at that time?
No. How I got acquainted with her, they were coming out of her class.
Oh, okay.
And some of them I got acquainted that way. And then finally one time I asked her, I guess we were in between classes or something, where I had a chance to talk to her for a minute or two, asked her if she'd like to go out to dinner, and started that way. And so that was the first date. We went out. I can't even tell you where we went for dinner, but we went out and then just went on from there.
Well, what attracted you to her?
Well, she's a nice looking gal. She seemed like about the right age. I think she was 20 or 21 at the time, somewhere around in there. People at the school that thought I was going to be dating one of the vocal teacher there or something at the time, and I wasn't too interested, and we just started in. I guess I don't think she was particularly attracted to me to start with. She thought I came over there and took kids out of class when and wasn't real pleasant, or it wasn't real smiley about the whole thing. I just came over and asked to see this one or that one or something like that, and so it was a little cool up till the time we started dating, and then things got a little better then.
Now, was she engaged at that time? Kay said something about her being engaged to another guy.
No, but she had had a pretty good relationship with a fella in college. She went to Parsons College, and a fella named Jack Miller that she had been going with, and I think eventually he married some girl from Sigourney, and so they weren't going together at the time. She wasn't going with anybody particularly when she was at Morning Sun there.
Because Kay was, I think, saying that there was a doctor's son that she was going with, or may have been engaged to.
That's when she was in high school, named Hargrove, Dean Hargrove.
Okay.
And he was a doctor's son, Dr. Hargrove, and they were high school sweethearts, or whatever you want to say. They just went together in high school, but I don't think she ever had any serious things about getting married or anything with him. So that, I think Kay misunderstood. I don't believe she was engaged to him at all. I met him and talked to him, and when we went back and forth between Morning Sun and her house and my house, she lived in Hedrick, and we'd go there once in a while, go to my house in Kyoto once in a while.
How long after you started dating did you introduce her to your parents?
I can't remember. when it was. I don't imagine it was too long. We did go to some football games. I don't know how I got the ticket, but we went to some Iowa football games. At least one that year, I remember. And we went to my parents' house. They were out on a farm at the time. And we went there and then went to the football game and came back there afterwards, I think.
What'd they think of her?
But they very accepting. My parents, I think, were the type that if I wanted to bring somebody home, that they figured I had already judged them a little bit and they weren't going to prejudge them, so they accepted her.
How long after you started dating did you meet her parents?
It wasn't too long. We went to Hedrick and met them there, and they lived in above. They had a store, and they lived above the store in downtown Hedrick, and so we spent the weekend. That's generally what it was. We'd teach, and any time that we met anybody or were away from there, it was either my parents or her parents. Most of the time that we stayed over the weekend with them, then come back on Sunday.
Well, who were some of her friends when you first met her?
Well, she had some sorority sisters that she'd been with. You're asking me to remember things back in 1952 and 53. I do remember one friend was named Sue Messerly, and there was a Bonnie. I can't remember Bonnie's last name. I think Bonnie was. She was in. I believe both those were in the wedding party when we eventually got married. They stood up with her, and I can't remember Bonnie's last name. She was engaged to somebody, or got engaged to somebody at the time. Through her acquaintance at Parsons College, we got to know a couple that were there, Tom and Marla Nags, and we go down there and visit them. They lived in Burlington at the time, and we go down and see them occasionally. Gave us another place. There wasn't much to do in Morning Sun, and we were either going someplace or we'd go to a movie or do something, maybe travel to Washington to go see a movie and then come back. And I was trying to think of anybody else. Her friends there in Hedrick, she still was friends with Dean Hargrove, and then there was Hargrove, was he a doctor? There's Roger Perkins, that was the doctor. Roger Perkins was another friend, and there was Watts that was there in Hedrick, Fern Watts, and then her brother, there was another one. Who was the young lad that was there? I can't remember his name, but I got acquainted with them, and they were friends of hers, and I can't think of too many more out of the college that she had as acquaintances that I got acquainted with. Just those few that I could think of.
When did you realize that you wanted to get engaged to her?
Well, I was 25 years old at the time, I think, and it wasn't a case where I was desperate or anything like that. I had my own life, and I was running around doing things I wanted to do, but we'd been going together, and we both had similar tastes and things. We liked music and liked going to movies and doing other things. She wasn't a big sports fan, but I was, and she went along with the thing. So I guess we both decided that getting married was a pretty good idea at the time, and we did. As I said, I think we got engaged about Christmas time. Got a ring and gave her a ring.
Did you give her a ring get a ring before you proposed or after?
Well, I more or less proposed and then went and got the ring afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And how did your folks react to you being engaged?
Oh, I think they were happy that I finally was going to get married. And her folks were a little surprised, I think, but they were accepting. And she, as I say, she was 20, going on 21 years old, so she was still just out of the house there, not too long. She'd gone 2 years to Parsons and over in Fairfield, and so things went along pretty smoothly there.
So at your wedding, who was in your wedding party?
Well, my best man was my friend down in Morning Sun, who was the coach, and named Leo Staley, and one of my ex-roommate from school at Iowa State Teachers, which is now University of Northern Iowa, Carl Fulster, was stood up, and then Bob Brown, who was a high school friend of mine, and her brother Gary was in the party also. And I forgot to say, among the others that stood up with her, and maybe you're going to ask me this later, but Norma, my sister, was in the wedding party and stood up with her. Norma was pregnant with their first child when she was in the wedding party. And we were married in May, and then Pam was born in November of that year. So, and a fellow that married us was the minister named, oh, they call him Stan. I can't remember what his last name was. And she thought quite a bit of him. He was a nice personality, and I think had worked with the youth quite a bit there in Hedrick at the Methodist Church. And these friends are hers, mostly, I think, belong to the church there too.
Was Mom surprised that you proposed to her?
I think it just kind of emanated. We were going together, and I think just nothing surprising, but at the same time, it was quite a step. And that I can't say that she acted surprised, but at the same time, we both decided that this was the thing we'd like to do.
Grandma Breon pretty excited?
Yeah, I think so. I remember I was back in the store talking to her dad, and she went back and showed her mother the ring, and her mother let out a big yell, and so she was surprised.
And she got pretty involved in the planning of the wedding along with Mom, didn't she?
Oh yeah. She had it. Her mother was acquainted with quite a few women there in Hedrick, and I don't mean they had a big club or anything, but they traveled around in the town and went and had coffee together and did things like that. And she involved quite a few of them, and they were friends with as you would expect in a small town. They knew a lot of people, and included them in the planning and all that.
Now, Grandma made the wedding dress, right?
Yes. Yes, she did. Quite a thing. She was a good seamstress,
mm-hmm.
and made a lot of. In fact, I think Joanne said that she made quite a few of her clothes, not all of them, but she made several things for her when she was going to high school. She was pretty well dressed, I believe, there.
Were you involved with the planning of the wedding at all?
Oh, not too much.
Yeah.
Just other than you need to do this, you need to do that, and this is what the tradition is and all. And I went along with it. Having not been married before, I was willing to do what they told me to do. So if I would have found something objectionable, I'd have probably said something, but everything went along pretty smoothly. There, as you could expect, there were times when maybe Joanne thought she was over planning a little bit, and they get kind of a snippy argument once in a while, she and her mother, and then we'd take off and get out. But I think that's all part of weddings. You're going to have a few acrimonious minutes there with each other. So,
do you remember how much it cost for the wedding rings?
No. But with my spending habits that I had, probably took every penny I had. And I may even had to borrow a little bit to get it, and it got all paid back. But I don't imagine the ring cost over a couple $100 or something like that. Probably $200 or $250. But that's something I guess I should have remembered, but I really don't.
Now, at the wedding, I think you've told me that you got dressed over at Aunt Blanche's. Is that right?
That's right. Her Aunt Blanche and Keith, her Uncle Keith. I went over there and got dressed. Of course, you're not supposed to see the bride before you get to the ceremony, and I stayed there and then went over to the church, and then we had the wedding and the reception in the church. It was in the basement of the church, and a typical Midwestern Protestant wedding that the strongest thing you would have is a cup of coffee probably afterwards. So that down there, so that made everybody happy, I guess.
Didn't have a bunch of guys out in the parking lot with flasks?
No, I don't think so. They did decorate the car. They went out and painted up the car a little bit and did some stuff, put marbles in the hubcaps, and so.
I was looking over the guest book and the different names that are in there, and there was quite a few people that showed up. Yes,
I had quite a few friends and acquaintances in Kyoto, and she had quite a few in her town, plus the college, and plus people we knew. Let's see, she had taught at Milton before she came up to, I think she taught 1 year at Milton, Iowa, and before she came up to Morning Sun. And two people that were at the wedding and were friends, and we traveled back and forth with them. Some were Clyde and Charlotte, trying to think of his last name, Summers, Clyde and Charlotte Summers. And and quite a few people from Kyoto came to the wedding. And probably I over-invited, but they were all very gracious and came to the wedding.
Well, looking over the gift list too, you guys got a lot of stuff.
Yes, we did. In fact, this Clyde Summers made the statement to us. He said he looked at that basement in the church, and he said it looked like Sears store down there is what it looked like, with all the shelves full of presents. Yeah, we were treated very nicely with presents.
Yeah, I think somebody even gave you a refrigerator, didn't they?
We helped get that refrigerator. I think we bought it. There was her dad went out and knew somebody that was going to get rid of a refrigerator, and we got it at a pretty good price. And then her mother and dad gave us a Maytag gas stove for a wedding present, and they had, being a Maytag dealer and doing repair work, he and Gary and I, her brother, worked on a Maytag washing machine, a wringer washer, and got it working pretty good. So we had that to take along with us too whenever we needed it.
And then you took off for your honeymoon and went to St. Louis?
St. Louis. We stayed at St. Louis and in a motel down there, and then we went to the zoo one day, St. Louis Zoo, and went to ball games. This being newly married, I suspect she wasn't going to argue about going to baseball games too much, but I had a chance to see Major League Baseball, and it was the St. Louis Browns, who no longer exist, that were playing, and we got to see them play Cleveland and the White Sox. And we got to see Satchel Paige was down in the bullpen for the St. Louis Browns, and got to see Bob Lemon pitch for Cleveland. I don't remember who pitched or who played for the White Sox at the time, but it was a beautiful May evening, nice and warm, and sitting out in the ballpark, and so that and the zoo, and it would pretty much then spent about 2 or 3 days there in St. Louis. Came back.
Did you stop at Hannibal also?
We might have. We at one point or another we did stop and went through. There's a cave there that you can go and walk down in. That might have been part of the deal, either not on the way down but on the way back, or we might have made another trip down there at one time or another. But we did go to Hannibal, and we went to see Mark Twain's place down there in Hannibal.
So was school out when you got married?
Yes, it was just out. In Iowa, they get out of school a little sooner. We were married May 24th, and I think school was out the 21st or 22nd, something like that. So right after school that following weekend, we were married.
And how long did you live in Morning Sun? When did you take off for Pocahontas?
We left for Pocahontas. I had contracted for that job, and so had she, I believe. He came down and interviewed me down there at the superintendent, Waldo Mick, who incidentally happened to be a native of Hedrick and had gone to high school at Hedrick. And they signed me. I can't remember exactly when they signed her up to be a teacher up there, but we eventually went. That was our first job. We went together, and she taught. I'm not sure which grade. She ended up teaching 3rd grade or something, 3rd or 4th. I can't remember what she taught that first year there, but I was again up there to Pocahontas teaching band from 5th grade through 12th grade, everything there. The one thing I did at Morning Sun besides teaching band was I had freshman and sophomore English that I taught in the high school at part of the job.
Were you also coaching at Morning Sun?
No, I didn't. They started football, and I went out and tried to help a little bit with that because they'd never played football there before as an organized high school sport. But no, I didn't coach there. I just strictly was the band director.
And did you have a marching band also?
We started them a little bit marching. It didn't amount to much there because they'd never done that. They didn't even have a pep band for basketball games or anything, and I started that while I was there. And I think it continued after I left.
Now, Mom went to college at Parsons. Was that a 2-year?
No, it was a full 4-year school, but you could at that time get what they called a kindergarten primary degree by going 2 years to college and taking the proper courses. You are eligible to go teach everything from kindergarten through 8th grade. That's since gone by the wayside, and you have to have at least a bachelor or a bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree to do it, but at that time they allowed, in fact, there were a lot of people did that, and then maybe go back and pick up classes during the summer and work on toward a bachelor's degree, but at that time that was allowed.
Was she looking to further her college education?
I don't think so, no. She was finishing up a Bible course or something at the time, I think, trying to get credit for it by correspondence while she was there. She and I worked on that a couple times, answering questions and sending them in.
So was she going to church when you met her?
Probably. Neither one of us was going to church very much at that time. I went some to the church there at Morning Sun if I was around on the weekend. A lot of times I went back home to Kyoto and spent the weekend there with my parents. But
do you know how she paid for college?
I think probably her parents helped some. At that time, it wasn't real expensive, even though this is a private college. I don't think it's real expensive to go to college. And I'm not sure. She might have worked a little in the kitchen or something like that. I really don't know. But she never mentioned too much about it, how it was paid for. But it got paid for somehow.
Did she say why she picked that college?
No. I have no idea why she went there. She liked it. She had real good experiences down there and thought it was a lot of fun. And typical, 18 or 19-year-old, that was a sorority and the whole bit, so why wouldn't you like it?
What other activities was she in college, or did she tell you?
I'm not sure she was in too many activities. I know at one time she, in high school, she told me she sang, and she liked to sing and was in a group that did that, I believe. But I don't know if she carried that on through college particularly.
And of course, she played piano.
Yes. She was not a good piano player, but she was an adequate piano player that could understand what was going on. In fact, I don't know if you're going to get to that, but eventually when I was giving lessons, sometimes I'd take, after we were married and we had kids of our own, if I gave private lessons at the house, if they were playing a solo, they'd take them upstairs to the piano and she'd sit down and accompany them on the piano to get the better feel for the solo things.
Well, you did that with me a number of times.
Yeah.
So I remember that. Did she get into acting at all?
Not that I know of. If she did, it was a mystery to me.
Well, what else did she tell you about growing up in Hedrick, about her life before you?
Well, I think she did the typical thing. She thought a lot of her grandparents, especially on her dad's side, the Breon, Jess, and what was her name again? Viola liked them a lot. She liked her Grandma and Grandpa McHenry too, and she had a uncle that was younger than she was, Max and McHenry down there in Tumwa. I think she did the typical things in school, sang, and probably was in activities. I don't think she was in athletics particularly. But that's pretty much her typical high school, I believe.
Now, there was a point where they moved, I think it was at the beginning of World War II, to California.
Yes.
And from what I understand, the kids weren't happy about being there. Is that right?
she spoke some. They went to Santa Barbara, I believe, is where it was, and where they lived. Her dad worked in an airplane factory during the World War II, and I think they wanted to come back. I don't know if she did. I don't think Gary liked it out there. Her brother, younger brother, don't think he was wild about it. I don't know what brought them back. They lived out there, I don't know how many years, 3 years probably, and she went to elementary school there, and then they came back and settled into Hedrick again, and started up the kind of a variety shop is what it was. He delivered, at that time they didn't have a natural gas pipeline through there, so people wanted to use gas for their stoves and for water heaters and things. Why, he had bottled gas that he took out and took a full tank and then bring the empty back, and that was part of his work also. Besides, and the mother, Gladys, ran the store down there, and she had some help. Some local people come in. Martha was one I remember that, and at the time she also had a boarder. One of the teachers, Florence, was there. Florence James stayed with her up there upstairs and helped, rented a place up there, so that helped with expenses too a little bit.
You think she had a happy childhood?
I think so, pretty much. She, I don't believe, was as close or everything was fine, except I don't think she had a real loving relationship with her parents that much. She made the statement one time to me that she wished that she had had the same relationship after we were married, and she could see this, that she wished she had the same relationship with her parents that I had with mine, that she could see right away that we were very close and had a lot of love for each other. And I don't mean that they disliked each other. That wasn't it. I think her parents did things for her, and I think her mother tried to overdo things for her, and this caused a little resentment or something. And her mother could be a little overbearing if she wanted to be sometimes. And her dad didn't have too much to say about things. He talked a lot, but he didn't have too much to say about raising of the children or anything, I don't think.
Well, the one thing that I've always thought was kind of interesting was that she married a man that was so unlike her own father. It almost seems like she was looking for someone who was a stronger figure in her life than what she had at home. Would you agree?
Possibly. I don't know, and I never analyzed that or thought too much about it. She used to resent, I remember her when they would come visit, and her dad was doing nothing but trying to be friendly, and but he'd get telling tales about what went on and everything, and she always kind of acted like, and she didn't disguise it too well, that she just didn't care to hear too much, and that he was probably talking a whole lot too much, and that I liked him, and I got along fine with him, got along most of the time, well, I'd say all the time with her mother too, but I just didn't spot that particular thing.
Mm-hmm. How did Mom, did the two of you decide that you wanted children a little later? Because I know it was like 3 years after you got married before I was born. Or did you want children right away?
We never even discussed it particularly. We didn't do anything to prevent having children, but it just happened, more or less. And she taught that first year there in Pocahontas, and then taught this next year, and she got pregnant that year, and she taught up till about March. They wouldn't at that time, they wouldn't let you wear maternity clothes to teach. So she was wearing extra large skirts and boxy sweaters and things like that till I think it became pretty obvious, and then she had to quit for the year. But she taught about a year and a half. I think we were married in 53, and you were born in 55, so
it'll be 2 years,
yeah, so it was 2 years really. So,
and she never went back to teaching after
no.
that.
She is one of the few people I've ever known that actually said she didn't like teaching and yet was a good teacher. Most, if they don't like it, they don't do a very good job. But she was a good teacher, but she just never was interested in ever going back doing it again.
If she never got into teaching, what profession do you think she would have done?
I don't know. She was more or less trained for that when she went to Parsons.
Yeah.
So, or that's what she just chose to do, I suppose. As they say, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but after she got into it for a while, she decided maybe that isn't what she really wanted to do the rest of her life.
And I think she told me at one time that she had said, I think at the beginning of your marriage, that she wanted 5 children.
I can't remember that. I always thought after the first one, then we were going to have, when it became obvious we're going to have the next one, she said it might be nice to have a girl. I said I'd just soon have another boy, because if you have a girl, that's going to be it probably. So I said, if you have a boy, then you might try for a girl sometime. But she was happy with the family, and when after Kay was born, I think that's all we really needed and all we really wanted.
So you both decided no more children, or was that?
Yes, that was pretty much a mutual agreement. We figured we had enough to raise right then, if we could raise them and feed them and clothe them and educate them and everything else. Why, that was probably about enough at the time, because I wasn't. She was a homemaker and a household mother. I was the sole source of income, and we weren't making that much money. So even though I was in a teaching profession and doing okay, there wasn't a lot of extra money to go around. So we didn't need any more children.
Well, I always have thought of Mom as being having some kind of an artistic flair, because it seemed like she had a lot of hobbies and a lot of things that she would get into that was artistic. Like she did the paint by numbers, and of course the sewing, and then she did the quilting things. Did you kind of notice that too in her?
Yes, she liked to do that. She at home, she liked to be busy doing things and pretty creative with it. She was had very good handwriting, and could draw a little bit. I wouldn't say she was an artist, but she could certainly do things. She enjoyed. She'd go from one thing kind of to the other. That paint by numbers she did. Oh, I imagine for 2 or 3 years. This is probably when we were in Keokuk that she did that more or less. Got really going on it, and then she got later on into the quilting and really went very well on it too, and did a nice job. And she was a good seamstress. She had to learn, as everybody does, and make her mistakes, but she enjoyed sewing and got some good equipment later on, and did a nice job sewing.
Well, she made a lot of outfits for Kay.
Yes, she did. Yeah, she had pretty good talent about creating things and following patterns and doing what she needed to do.
Just fine. Well,
Do you think she was?
He's just sitting here.
You think she was a happy mother and wife and just kind of in her element?
I believe so. She
Okay.
enjoyed the children, and
It's Mel.
oh,
He said just short conversation.
oh,
Well, what did Mom think of her grandpa McHenry?
oh, she liked him. They were quite older grandparents. Of course, when you're in your 20s and things like that, everybody's old. It's over 35 or 40 probably. he had some, when I was acquainted with him, he'd had a stroke and he was not at his normal best. And he was a kind man, and seemed to me anyway, and thought a lot of her. And I think she was the first grandchild on both sides, I believe. I believe that's so, and they kind of doted on her. Most of them did, and yeah, she liked him, and she liked her grandmother, even though she was kind of a hard-bitten one that was very opinionated about things.
Well, there's pictures of her as a small child with Max and her grandmother. So they must have lived in the same area then.
Well, yeah, they were in Tumwa, and she was in Hedrick, and that was probably 15, 20 miles away from each other, so they could travel back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Which of the deaths of her grandparents do you think hit her the hardest?
I think shock. The first year we were married, I believe her grandma Viola died that year in 1953. I think she.
It was 57, or you may be right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Because we'd gone to Pocahontas to teach, and I think she died, and we came back for the funeral. It was either that year or the next year. It was either 53 or 54. Her grandmother died, and I think that hit her pretty good. They were old enough that it didn't come as a complete shock, but her grandpa Breon lived to, gosh, I think he was quite high in his 80s when he died, and he might have even been close to 90. And that, of course, was a matter of time, and she thought a lot of him. He used to take her around, and she said that when she was a little girl, he'd get a pillow and put her in the car and ride around with her and things like that. So, excuse me.
Did you get to know any of the grandparents pretty well?
To a certain degree, just like you would when you're in and out. We weren't living around there most of the time, and so I was friendly with them, and they seemed to accept me all right. Her grandmother McHenry wasn't too wild about it because she thought I was too old for Joanne. I was 25, or I guess 26 when we got married, and she was 21, and so. But I think she came to understand that we were a pretty good couple, so she got over that.
So, whose idea was it to move to Keokuk? Was that you, just because there was a job there?
Well, this was one of those that just happened to be a job. I'd been at Pocahontas for 6 years, and it was getting so that if I was going to make a move and do anything, I needed to be moving. You either move up and try to advance yourself a little bit like you do in most jobs or professions, or you just stay there and figure on that's what you're going to do the rest of the time. And we liked it at Pocahontas. Both you and your brother Mark were born there, and we were happy. We had good friends and everything, but professionally I was teaching everything from 5th grade through 12th grade, and this was a chance at Keokuk, if I could get the job, was to teach just strictly junior high and work with that, and not have contests to worry about particularly, and marching band and all the other things. Not that I was trying to get an easy job. Working with junior high kids isn't the easiest job in the world. Mm-hmm. But more or less spatialize and be able to spend a little more time at home at night, because with that you're working there to get children or students prepared to do what they're going to do, and you were up there at nights working with them and going out of town with things, and it gave me more time to spend with the family, in other words.
What did Mom think of Keokuk?
Well, we both said when we went there that we had to. I kind of said, well, let's figure we're going to come down here and we're going to like it. Let's not go in saying it's going to have to prove itself to us. Let's just say we're going to like it here and make a good life out of it, and we more or less did. Keokuk, we had a nice time in Keokuk. It was called the sinus belt of the Midwest because you're right on where the Des Moines River empties into the Mississippi, and the humidity was extreme during the summer months, and so it was really you had to get used to it, I'll tell you that. But we had a very good faculty, made quite a few friends there, and enjoyed ourselves. I would say it was a real good move.
Now, I always thought Mom was a good cook, but was she a good cook when you first got married?
Not particularly. She had to learn, like most of them do, I think. Unless they've done cooking as a child at home, if their mothers had them do quite a bit of cooking, and I don't think her mother did, who was an excellent cook also, and could do a lot of things. But Joanne had to learn and go, and she did. She was smart, and she'd learn from her mistakes, and she did things real well and turned into a real good cook.
So how often did you guys get together with your folks or her folks?
After we were married?
Yeah, in Pocahontas.
In Pocahontas, that was not too often. We did have season tickets to Iowa football games for about the first, I'd say 2 or 3 years or so we got married, and so we would go down to Iowa City and maybe spend a short weekend with my parents and then come back up. But outside of that, why, we'd see them occasionally. I don't think my parents came up very often. Hers didn't either. It's a pretty good little haul up there. It's, I think, 200 or 300 miles up there from southeast Iowa up to northwest Iowa, where we were. So we kept in touch and did all that, but we never spent much time traveling back and forth.
Now, there were the family get-togethers at Crapo Park in Burlington. How often did those happen?
In the summer, they'd pick a time in summer when we could be there, and of course I wouldn't be teaching at that time, so we were free to come down there and maybe spend a little time and go to Crapo Park. And I think we even did that when we were in Keokuk, which would have been easier because Burlington was Crapo Park was in Burlington, and that was about 20 some miles away from Morning Sun. Let's see, I'm talking Morning Sun, and I'm getting my times mixed up here because went to Morning Sun, then went to Pocahontas, then Keokuk and Burlington. Keokuk and Burlington, yeah. From Keokuk to Burlington was 35, 40 miles, maybe 50 miles, so we'd do that up there. That was once a summer we'd do that.
Did you take the River Road on the Mississippi all the way out?
Pretty much, yeah.
And it was actually a McHenry reunion, wasn't it?
Yes, it was on that side of the family. I think they had, the Breons were in on it too, but I think it was mostly McHenry.
Were there any that you didn't go to?
I can't remember if we missed any or not. If they were there, we probably went. It didn't happen for 15, 20 years. I remember doing that for maybe, to my mind, it was maybe 4 or 5 years would be the most, probably.
Well, there's pictures of me in there when I was probably 1 year old, so I know that you were doing it probably into the mid to late 50s.
Yeah.
But you're thinking that you also did it 1 year in Keokuk, huh?
Oh, I can't remember. I remember they came down with big. We had a big one at our house one time. We had
Right.
a lot of people in down there. Came down for a summer.
Yeah, there's colored pictures of that, and there's even a video, a very short video
Uh-huh.
of everybody out there when they're gathering around. It only lasts about 10 or 15 seconds, but it's interesting to see too.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first year that you were in Keokuk, wasn't it? Because it looked like Kay was not even a year old.
We went to Keokuk in 59 and 60. And Kay was born in 60. So it could very well have been. I don't know. Don't remember when that time was. It was probably when she was pretty young, either that or the next year when they came down. They all got together.
So do you remember, I think your parents even went to one of those Crapo Park reunions, didn't they?
I can't remember that. I don't think so, but they may have.
Was there anything equivalent in your family of a get-together every year?
That was before we were married. We didn't, by the time we were married, we didn't have that many. There were a few, but we didn't have that many, the relatives like they had around getting together. Mm-hmm. They were scattered more. And so when I was a young man, before we were married, why, we used to have family get-togethers and go to the park or go to each other's houses like most people did at that stage of our existence in the 30s, 40s, 50s and such.
Did you ever have any Army reunions that you went to?
No. I got out of the service and corresponded with one or two people a little bit, and that's about it. We trained at Fort Riley, Kansas, and I don't think most of us wanted to go back and get acquainted there, and so I was shipped overseas for occupation duty after I finished basic training and spent some time at the main post at Fort Riley afterwards. And then went out to ship to California, to Fort Ord, and then up to Fort Lawton, Washington, and then left there for Japan for occupation duty in 1945. And so there wasn't much need to get together to do anything like that.
Now, how did you find out that Mom had a brain tumor?
It was kind of a deal where you're so close to somebody that you don't notice little things. You see things, but you don't really connect them. And I suspected it had been coming on for a while, but Kay was one of them that spotted something. Before that, I noticed little things like she was a very fastidious person and kept herself clean, and she'd do things like spill coffee on herself or something, which would never happen before, and just motor skills weren't there quite. And we went to she and Kay went shopping one day, and she tried to write a check, and she ruined about 3 checks trying to write checks that her handwriting, and here was a woman who had fine handwriting, could barely understand what she'd written once she wrote something. And she said, "You better check on this." So we did. We went and checked with her primary care person, and they sent her to a specialist. They could see something wrong, and she went through tests and discovered that she had a brain tumor. And so you people all got in on that because eventually they got the family together and laid it out for us what exactly was going to happen. We went on a cruise that year also, and she just wasn't herself. This is before we discovered it, and this was in June, and she was diagnosed in July. But in June, we went on this cruise to Alaska, and she just was there and acted like she enjoyed the stuff a little bit, but not very enthusiastic. And I'd get ready to go to lunch, and I'd say, "You ready to go to lunch?" "No, I just stay here and stay in the room. You go on ahead." And we went to a movie. I think they had a movie on there, and then we'd go to whatever entertainment they had at night, and she wasn't even too thrilled with that. We'd play bingo go play bingo, and I think she more or less enjoyed the cruise, but she just wasn't herself. She just didn't. Your mother could not feel good and could fake it about as well as anybody I ever saw, being friendly and enthusiastic, even though she didn't want to be sometimes. But we'd go to, the one thing we did do was go to the evening meals, and we were sitting at a table of 6, and there were 4 ladies from Canada that we sat with, and so we enjoyed their conversations and repartee back and forth with each other and getting acquainted. So that worked out that she was pretty much normal during that time.
Now you went back to Iowa, I think about a month or so after she was diagnosed?
Yes, because her mother had died in March, and we had the ashes there, and we were going to take those back in September, I believe it was, to go back. So she put the ashes in a burial place out at the Hedrick Cemetery, and that's when we drove back. And I think at that time, yes, it was, your brother Mark had purchased a van that he was going to take to Savannah and use as a paint van, and we drove it through Denver and loaded it up with things we're going to take, and went to Denver and stayed there with, let's see, who did we stay with there? Some who was there yet.
Was it Gary's ex-girlfriend?
No, I don't think so. I don't really remember who we stayed with at that time. It might have been, I think we stayed with Carrie's uncle and aunt in Denver at that time, and then went on to Iowa and did that and got together for a deal at the Methodist church that the ladies put on a little luncheon after we had the ceremony out at the cemetery, and then we drove on, and somewhere along the line Mark came and got I think maybe from there, from someplace, Mark came and got the van and drove it on to Savannah, and we flew to Buffalo, New York, so we could see Niagara Falls and go across there. We knew by that time that we didn't know how much longer. She was still mobile, but she had her moments when I kind of had to support her, and was still coherent and doing, and we'd finished one of the things, the reason we waited till September, she had radiation treatments to go through every day, 5 days a week, until she finished that, and I don't know how long that was. 5 or 6 weeks she had to do that, I think. And when that finished, then we went back, and I'm getting the story mixed up now, but anyway, we flew to Buffalo, New York. We still had the van, I remember that. He hadn't gotten it yet. We might have even driven it clear down to Savannah. Anyway, I don't know how we could fly there and still have the van, but somehow we did. I'm getting mixed up on this. But we went to Buffalo and then drove across. I think we rented a car and drove across upper New York, and we were going to see quite a few other things. We did go to Cooperstown and stay there, and then we were going to do some other things. I had never been to New Jersey, and I wanted to see Trenton, New Jersey, because that's part of history and everything. And we went over there, and we're going to stay there, and decided we didn't like the atmosphere or just general topography or anything else, and we decided to just go on to Philadelphia, which is right across the river more or less, and we stayed in Philadelphia and then went on down, drove down. I don't know that we made it in one hitch or two hitches to Savannah, and then stayed with Mark and Carrie down there for a few days, and then flew back home. Pretty much was that. That was that, and then we took one more trip. Tried to do as many things as we could to see as many things as we could, and we took one more trip that we went to Hawaii and stayed at Kauai, and that was in November, and stayed for about a week there. First night or two in Honolulu, and then went to Kauai, stayed the rest of the time there, and then flew back to Honolulu and came back. And that was the last major trip we took anywhere, because she was getting more feeble all the time, that it was affecting her motor skills. And we went to the doctor, and he more or less pronounced that there wasn't too much they could do, and found out that there wasn't a whole lot of time left, probably, in spite of the fact that she'd been told that if she took these treatments, she'd probably live from a year to 18 months, and if she didn't, she'd last maybe 9 months, and this didn't happen. She lasted about 6 months is all, and you know the story there. She died on Christmas night of 1997.
Well, when you went back to Iowa, did she told people back there about the tumor, didn't she?
Well, she didn't say too much. I guess they knew it, and maybe I told them. At Hedrick, she didn't say too much about it when we were there. But I think her cousin Bev, who she was close to, Beverly Cruzen, knew about it, and they were there, and her other cousin Jerry Lorimer, was there. And then we went to Kyoto and visited with my sister and her husband Norman Roger. And then one of the trips we made was over to Kelowna. They had a big quilting show there at Kelowna in the gym, and we went over for that. And during that time, I guess I'm just saying things, but that was pretty obvious. Norman Roger saw her, and she about fell into a ditch. I had to catch her and walking along, and she enjoyed the quilting show, of course, but these were not real happy times at that from that moment on.
Well, did you tell your mom on that trip that she had the tumor?
Yeah, Mom was in, let's see, Mom was in the nursing home at that time. I don't know whether Joanne went out with me to see her or not. I don't remember if she did or not, but I told Mom about it, or maybe didn't tell her. I can't remember whether I told her or not.
I think you did.
If I did, why then I probably told her. I don't think Joanne did.
Well, I always wondered if Mom told people, or if you had done it.
I don't think she said much about it to anybody.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like something she would have done.
No.
Did she talk to you much about it?
No. tried to a couple times, and she just kind of cut it off. It just kind of told me that she didn't want to get to. I think she talked as much to Kay about it as she did me, or more, from what Kay says.
Yeah.
I don't know. She kind of changed her values a little bit of what she wanted to see and do, naturally, as you would when you know you're terminal with something. But at one time I asked her innocently that I had never done the washing or ironing or anything like that, and I asked her if she'd show me how to wash and what I had to do and all that, and she more or less snapped at me and said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I may need to help out and do that sometime," or something like that. Well, from there on, I didn't broach the subject too much of what was going to happen afterwards or anything, and just kind of probably should have talked more about it and tried to get her feelings about it, but she didn't seem to want to dwell on it any. And I remember she'd been a big soap opera fan all the way through. In fact, we used to watch when we were in Pocahontas. That's when, more or less, I think about the same year you were born, is when As the World Turns started as a soap opera, and that was one of her favorites. And she didn't, naturally, after she was diagnosed and went a little, she just lost all interest in that sort of thing at all. So that's what I meant by her values changing a little bit there. I think she said she had enough trouble. She didn't have to look at the As the World Turns to see theirs.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I've told you I've been doing is working on the Arnold family a little bit, and I don't know why, but I guess I should have asked Grandma when she was around some of these questions. But do you remember someone named Corinne Powell?
No, I don't.
There's pictures of her with Grandma. A number of pictures.
Might have been. She had some high school friends when she graduated from Kyoto High School that she felt pretty close to, and that might have been one of the friends. I'm not sure.
Well, there's a picture of her with Corinne Powell and Jesse, your Uncle Jess, and then Keith Dayton or Drayton.
Dayton.
Mm-hmm. And
Coith, I think his name was.
Coith?
Like it was like Cloyce, but Coith, I think they called. Typical small town, he was Sleepy Dayton. So I didn't really, hardly anybody knew his real first name, I don't think. Oh, go on with your question.
Well, I was just kind of curious as to what happened to this Corinne Powell, because there's a number of pictures, and so she must have been a good friend of Grandma's, but I didn't know if maybe she was a relative or not.
I don't think so.
I haven't come across the name at least. Do you know if your mom ever dated anybody other than your dad?
Yeah, she dated Jess one time. She said, I was asked about it. She said she dated him. I said, how is he as a date? She said he mostly talked about himself all the time. As you could imagine, Mom, the way she'd express that. I don't know if she had many dates. She never mentioned that doing a lot of dating. She did tell about, you might get a kick out of this, of course, her sense of humor is something like mine. And she was talking about a guy named Coffee Holmes that had one eye that didn't track just right, and he'd look at you, but you didn't know for sure if he was or not. And they were at a dance, and he looked over at her direction and said, "Would you want to dance?" And she turned around and said, and of course he got mad because he thought she was rejecting him or something, and she didn't realize he was talking to her. So
well, this picture that I was telling you about, the big family reunion that was taken in 1900, did you ever know any of your mother's aunts, like Maud Jones or let's see, there was the Tufts There was
Laura Tufts.
yeah.
They were around. I knew her. I wasn't real well acquainted, but you knew who she was, and I knew she was Laura Tufts, and she knew I was Bobby Sellman. So that's about as much as it was.
What about Bill's two children? He only had two, right? Gene and Bill.
Gene and Bill, yes.
Whatever happened to them?
Gene and they're both in Montana.
They're still alive?
Yes. Now that surprised me because Norma corrected me on this. I thought Bill was gone, but no, she said he's alive. He's out there in Montana. I think he works for the highway department. I'm not sure. Gene's name now is Dawson. She married, can't remember his first name. She has at least 2 or 3 children, I think. 2 for sure. I'm not real sure. She stayed with us. Her mother, Marvel, was quite ill. She had lost her dad as before Marvel, I think, got married to George Adams. And Jean stayed with us my 8th grade year in school over the winter while her mother seriously ill and was in the hospital, and we were in our own private little depression at that time. The rest of the country was snapping out of it, and my dad took a job as a feed salesman on a commission basis, and we had our own private depression during that year. And of all the things, of course, my mother never hesitated taking on another mouth to feed when things weren't that great at our house, but we didn't starve to death, and we were all, I'm trying to make it sound like we were destitute. We weren't, but this wasn't a real prosperous time of our lives.
Now, what about Gerald? He had a daughter, didn't he?
He had several daughters.
And what happened to them?
If I can remember the order of them, Mary Grace was the oldest, and then there was Dorothy May and Virginia Clare. Virginia was in the same class with me. We graduated from high school together. Mary Grace, they still are trying to find her. Every year they come back, and I don't know if she's still around or gone, but every year the alumni banquet, they're trying to locate different ones in different years' classes. They all graduated from Kyoto High School, and that Mary Grace, she went someplace. I don't know where she ended up, but they can't find her. I think Dorothy may be gone, and Virginia died of cancer. I don't know when, but she was married and died quite young. So that was his family.
What about Everett?
He had Helen Eileen and Howard and Ronald. I think that was the family there.
Now, wasn't there one that was middle name of Velda? Velda Hagist, I think.
Well, Velda was Everett's wife.
Oh, okay.
Her name was Hagist originally.
That's right.
But it was Velda Arnold.
Yeah.
There was Everett and Velda, and what is Gerald's wife's name?
Is that Alma?
Alma, I think, yes.
Alma Messerschmitt.
Yeah, Messerschmitts, they were. And they were from around Hedrick, I think, someplace originally.
Now, there's a picture of a Ron Arnold.
That's Everett's son.
Okay.
That's he was about the same age as Roger, my brother-in-law, Norma's husband. And they might have been 1 year apart, but they were buds, and Roger was known as Jar at the time, and they called him Jar and Jug. Roger and Ronnie. And Ronnie, pretty sharp guy. He went with State Farm Insurance. He died just I keep forgetting to ask Norma. I'm sure he died of heart trouble, but I keep forgetting to ask my sister what got him, because this was just a couple or 3 years ago that he passed away. Ronnie did. I think Howard's still alive. I don't know about Helen Eileen. She's the one that I have to tell this story about. She married a fellow named Johnny Morris, and he'd been a prisoner of the Japanese quite early on in World War II. Came back and they started a family, and they had this little boy, and obviously quite sharp. Helen Eileen was a very sharp person, and I think Johnny was pretty sharp. And he went to kindergarten, and the teacher said something to him about, you need to be doing this, and he said, I am not accustomed to being issued ultimatums. They moved him up to first grade, got him out of there just as fast as they could, I guess. So here's this little 5-year-old spouting off that way. I'd like to know what he's like now. That'd be interesting to see.
Now, what about Ciora's children?
She had one, Arlene, and she married Hayden Davis, and they had one child, Betty Ann. So that was Wayne and Ciora's only grandchild. And
is Betty still around?
No. Arlene, you mean?
No, the daughter.
I think so. She's in Illinois, married, and I think they had one or two children. I'm not sure how many.
I was trying to think of some of the others that I ran across. The big one was Corinne Powell, because I was trying to remember.
The only reason I can think of Corinne Powell, we had John and his wife that lived up the street. In fact, they were my grandma Sellman's landlords. They lived right next door to her there in Kyoto. And that was John and what was her name? Powell. And that might have been their daughter. I'm not sure.
And he was the funeral home director?
No, this is different Powells altogether. He was a farmer and had been a farmer, I think, and he was mayor of Kyoto there for a time or two also, and they went to the same church we did. But that would be the only reason I would, or the only acquaintance that I could think of that might have been their daughter, but I don't know how many children they had.
Well, I think I'll end this one here.